In the quiet hills of Greenbrier County, West Virginia, nestled among the misty folds of the Appalachian Mountains, there lingers a story as chilling as it is compelling. It is the only known case in American legal history where the testimony of a ghost, yes, a ghost, led to the conviction of a murderer. This is not folklore spun around a campfire. It's a documented courtroom drama, etched into public record, where the spectral voice of the dead refused to be silenced. Our story begins in the winter of 1897, in the small town of Livesay's Mill. Back then, Greenbrier County was a remote and close-knit community where gossip traveled faster than any horse-drawn carriage. People knew each other's names, families, and habits. But even in such a tight-knit place, not everything was as it seemed. Behind the whitewashed fences and coal fires, dark secrets simmered beneath the surface. One such secret would soon crack open, exposing a tale so bizarre it would echo through history and into the realm of the supernatural. The story centers on a young woman named Zona Heaster, known to those around her simply as Zona. She was just 23 years old when she died suddenly and mysteriously. Her body was found in her home, laid out at the foot of the stairs. According to her husband, Erasmus Stribling Trout Shue, an eccentric blacksmith with a dark past, Zona had simply fallen ill and passed away quietly. He claimed it was a heart attack, and because he made such a scene, overcome with grief and insisting she be buried quickly, few questioned his story at first. But not everyone was convinced. Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, knew her daughter better than anyone, and something about her death, the way her body was positioned, the odd behavior of Trout Shue, it all gnawed at her soul. Mary Jane would not let her daughter's death rest easily in the earth. She began praying, pleading for a sign. If Zona had suffered, if something evil had been done, Mary Jane wanted the truth, and the truth, it seemed, was not willing to stay buried. What followed was a series of events that defied logic, challenged belief, and yet are undeniably part of the historical record. According to Mary Jane, her daughter Zona began appearing to her in the night. Not in dreams, she insisted, but in physical, waking visions. The ghostly figure of Zona told her mother the truth, how she'd been strangled in a fit of rage by her husband, Trout Shue. She described the exact manner of her death, down to the broken neck and crushed windpipe. Night after night, the ghost returned, repeating the same harrowing tale. It would be easy to dismiss this as the ravings of a grief-stricken mother. But the details Zona's ghost revealed matched precisely with what a later autopsy would confirm. Her neck had been broken. The signs of strangulation were clear, and thus, the court would eventually hear a most unusual testimony from the grave. This story, now known as the Greenbrier Ghost, remains one of the most unique murder cases in American history. It straddles a line between the rational and the mystical, where law and legend meet. It challenges our understanding of justice, the limits of science, and the power of belief. And above all, it underscores a chilling truth. Sometimes the dead speak louder than the living. Over the next hour, we'll take you deep into the shadowed world of Greenbrier County. We'll uncover the life and tragic death of Zona Heaster. We'll examine the evidence, the ghostly visitations, and the courtroom drama that followed. We'll meet the strange man she married, and the chilling secrets he tried to keep hidden. And we'll explore the question that still haunts historians and paranormal investigators alike. Did Zona truly return from the grave to reveal her killer? Buckle up, because this is not just a ghost story. It's a murder mystery that defies time, a legal case that breaks every rule, and a tale of a mother's love that refused to die. Next, we meet Zona Heaster, the woman behind the ghost, and trace the final days that led to a tragic and suspicious death. Before she became a ghost, before she was remembered in legal lore and paranormal history, Zona Heaster was simply a young woman trying to build a life in the hills of West Virginia. Born in 1873 in Greenbrier County, Zona, her middle name and the one she preferred, was the daughter of Jacob and Mary Jane Heaster. She grew up in a modest family, surrounded by farmland, Appalachian traditions, and a quiet rural lifestyle. Zona was said to be spirited and independent, a rare quality for women of her time. She was beautiful, with long dark hair and striking eyes. Yet, In a conservative community where expectations for women were largely tied to domestic life and obedience, Zona didn't always fit the mold. She had a bit of a wild streak. Some neighbors said, a tendency to seek more than what her rural surroundings offered. It was a spirit that would eventually lead her down a path no one could have predicted. In 1896, a stranger came to town. His name was Erasmus Stribling Trout Shue, though he often simply went by Trout. He arrived in Greenbrier County looking for work and quickly found position as a blacksmith, a respected trade in a town that still relied heavily on horses and manual labor. He was tall, well-built, and had a sort of rugged charm that made him stand out. But beneath that polished exterior was a man with secrets, a man who had left behind a trail of shadows. Trout Shue told the townspeople that he was looking to start over, to build a new life in a quiet town far from whatever past he had come from. He soon caught Zona's eye, and despite the reservations of her mother, Mary Jane, the two began courting. It was a whirlwind romance. Within just a few weeks, Zona and Trout were married, in defiance of her mother's strong objections. Mary Jane Heaster had a bad feeling from the start. She believed Trout Shue was hiding something. He seemed overly controlling and secretive. Still, in the 1890s, a daughter's marriage was considered final, and Zona had chosen her path. After their wedding, the couple moved into a small house near Trout's blacksmith shop in Livesey's Mill. At first, all seemed well. Zona wrote letters to friends, occasionally visited her family, and appeared content. But soon, subtle changes began to appear. She grew more distant, quieter, even withdrawn. Some neighbors noticed bruises on her arms. Others remarked how she rarely left the house unless she was with her husband. Trout Shue, on the other hand, seemed overly possessive. He never let Zona speak freely when others were around. He made all the decisions, even about the smallest details of their daily lives. Then, on January 23rd, 1897, tragedy struck. A young boy named Andy Jones, who often helped Trout with chores, was sent to the Shue home with instructions to ask Zona if she needed anything from the blacksmith shop. When Andy arrived, the door was ajar. He stepped inside and called out her name. There was no answer. As he moved through the quiet house, he saw Zona's lifeless body at the foot of the stairs. She was stretched out on the floor, arms by her sides, legs together, eyes wide open and staring. Her skin was pale, and her head rested at a strange, unnatural angle. Terrified, Andy ran for help. Soon, Trout Shue and the local doctor arrived. But by the time the physician could examine her, Trout had already dressed Zona in a high-neck gown and placed a veil over her face. Unusual, even suspicious behavior. The doctor, puzzled, could find no clear cause of death. Trout insisted that Zona had been feeling unwell for days and must have died from female troubles, a vague, antiquated term with no real medical basis. The doctor, perhaps intimidated by Trout's erratic emotional display and urgent insistence on avoiding further examination, listed her cause of death as everlasting faint, and left it at that. Zona was buried the next day. The funeral was peculiar. Trout hovered constantly around the casket, refusing anyone a final look at her face. He cradled her head, adjusted the scarf around her neck again and again, and grew angry when someone moved too close. People whispered about it afterward, wondering why he seemed so obsessed with her neck. Mary Jane Heaster, however, didn't just wonder. She knew something wasn't right. Her daughter had been healthy and strong. There was no warning, no illness, and certainly no reason for such a sudden and suspicious death. Mary Jane's instinct screamed that her daughter had not died of natural causes. She began to pray for answers, and the answers, it seemed, were ready to come. What happened next would turn a tragic death into a story of supernatural defiance, with a line between the living and the dead blurred. Zona Heaster may have been buried in the cold West Virginia ground, but her voice was just beginning to rise. Next, a mother's intuition turns into a paranormal revelation as Mary Jane begins receiving nightly visits from the spirit of her dead daughter. In the days following Zona Hester's funeral, the hills of Greenbrier County seemed quieter than usual. Life carried on. Plows returned to the fields and blacksmiths fired up their forges. But in one farmhouse, silence hung heavy and thick. Mary Jane Hester sat alone in her parlor, staring at the flickering lamplight, her hands clenched in her lap. Her daughter was dead, and she did not believe it was an accident. Mothers know. That's what she told herself, over and over. Mothers know when something is wrong with their children. And Mary Jane had always been close to Zona, closer than most. In fact, they had shared stories, laughter, and even secrets. Zona had confided in her about life with Trout Shue. She had hinted that something wasn't right, that her marriage was far from the picture-perfect union she pretended it to be. Mary Jane couldn't forget the way Trout had acted during the funeral. He had insisted on dressing Zona himself, a highly unusual practice for a grieving husband. He had put her in a high-collared burgundy dress with a stiff neck, then wrapped a scarf around her throat, tying it tight and refusing to remove it. When mourners tried to look into her face, he became erratic, pacing back and forth, moaning dramatically and even physically shielding the coffin. Then there was the positioning of the body. Mary Jane hadn't seen it firsthand, but young Andy Jones had. He described how Zona lay at the bottom of the stairs, unnaturally straight, as though someone had placed her there. The details didn't add up, not to Mary Jane. Zona had been healthy and strong, with no history of illness. Everlasting faint, they said, or female trouble. But those weren't real answers. They were excuses, vague, convenient excuses that didn't satisfy a mother's grief. Mary Jane began to pray, not the soft, comforting prayers of acceptance, but desperate invocations for justice. She asked God to send her a sign, to reveal the truth, even if it came from beyond. She wanted clarity. She wanted certainty. But most of all, she wanted Zona to speak. And then, according to Mary Jane, Zona did. It began slowly. The first night, Mary Jane dreamed of her daughter, standing at the foot of her bed, her eyes sad and searching. It felt too real to be just a dream. The next night, Zona came again. This time, she moved. She reached for her mother's hand. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Mary Jane awoke in tears, convinced Zona was trying to tell her something. Then came the fourth night, and everything changed. Zona appeared brighter, more solid than ever before. Mary Jane described her as glowing, clothed in the same burgundy dress she had been buried in. But her face was no longer serene. It was twisted in pain. Zona began to speak, and what she told her mother would turn this quiet Appalachian ghost story into a murder investigation. According to Mary Jane, Zona's ghost described how Trout Shue had killed her in a fit of rage. He had flown into a jealous temper when she told him she hadn't prepared meat for dinner. He had grabbed her neck with both hands and squeezed. She had tried to scream, to fight him off, but he had broken her neck. Zona's ghost told her mother that her neck had been snapped so violently that it popped between the first and second vertebrae. She returned for 4 nights, Mary Jane said, telling the story in painful detail, how she had been attacked, how her windpipe had been crushed, and how her killer had staged the body to look like an accident. These weren't the vague ramblings of grief. Mary Jane recounted the exact words, gestures, even physical demonstrations the ghost made, tilting her own head to one side, as if mimicking the broken neck Zona had suffered. And when the final vision ended, Zona's ghost turned, slowly drifted into the dark corner of the room, and vanished. To many, such a tale would be the stuff of delusion. The mind plays tricks in mourning, skeptics say. But Mary Jane wasn't content to dismiss the visions as grief-induced hallucinations. She believed them with all her soul. She believed that Zona had come back, not just to say goodbye, but to demand justice. Fueled by what she claimed were nightly visits from her daughter's spirit, Mary Jane began speaking to neighbors, to friends, and eventually to the county prosecutor. She relayed every detail of the ghostly encounters with unwavering conviction. At first, people thought she was mad. But then came the moment that turned whispers into action. Mary Jane demanded that Zona's body be exhumed. She insisted that if they opened the grave and examined the neck, they would find the proof, bruising, breakage, evidence of murder. The community scoffed. The prosecutor hesitated, but her persistence paid off. Eventually, Dr. George W. Knapp, the same physician who had given the original, vague diagnosis, agreed to perform a full autopsy, this time with particular attention to Zona's neck. The The stage was set for something extraordinary. A mother's dreams, a ghost's testimony, and a second look at a body that may still have been speaking, without uttering a single word. Next, an exhumation that shocked the town and unearthed the horrifying truth hidden beneath Zona's grave. The veil between the living and the dead is, for most of us, an unbreachable divide. But for Mary Jane Heaster, that boundary shattered the moment her daughter, Zona, appeared in her bedroom. Not in memory or in a dream, but in what Mary Jane insisted were physical, waking visitations. To Mary Jane, Zona's ghost was not some shadowy figure floating on the edge of her mind. She was vibrant, clear, and angry. She spoke plainly, described the events of her death in chilling detail, and demanded that the truth be revealed. These were not vague impressions or dreamlike symbols. This was testimony, spoken from beyond the grave. Each night, the spirit returned, pacing the floor, speaking in a calm yet bitter tone. She recounted the day of her murder with agonizing clarity. She had prepared a simple meal. Trout came home in one of his infamous moods, jealous, possessive, and irrational. He accused her of flirting with another man, of shaming him. Then, Zona said, he attacked. He wrapped his large hands around her throat and squeezed. He had killed her not in a moment of passion, but with deliberate cruelty. She described a moment her neck snapped between the first and second vertebrae. She said she had tried to scream, but no air had come. The pressure on her windpipe had crushed her voice. And just like that, her life had ended. Mary Jane listened in shock, taking in every word, every gesture. Zona's ghost did not just speak, she demonstrated. Her head tilted violently to the side. Her voice faltered into a whisper, mimicking the suffocation. It was as if she was reliving it, not just recalling it. These episodes continue for 4 nights in a row, each time confirming the same story. She had been murdered, and her killer was her husband. Mary Jane told neighbors. She told friends. And, despite the risk of ridicule, she told the authorities. Most people in Greenbrier County were God-fearing and church-going, but few openly admitted belief in ghosts. Spiritualism had swept parts of the country in the 19th century, especially after the Civil War. But here in West Virginia, such things were usually kept quiet. Still, there was something unshakable in Mary Jane's voice when she recounted the visions. She wasn't hysterical. She wasn't confused. She was composed, confident, and what's more, she wasn't asking for sympathy. She was demanding action. When word reached Prosecutor John Alfred Preston, he initially dismissed it. The idea that a ghost could be the key witness in a murder case bordered on absurd. But Mary Jane's conviction gave him pause. There had already been whispers about Trout Shue, his strange behavior at the funeral, his insistence on dressing the body, his refusal to let anyone near the casket. These things were not easily ignored. Preston decided to act, but not because he believed in ghosts. He believed in justice. And something about the entire case smelled rotten. He began asking quiet questions. Interviewed the boy who found the body. Spoke to Dr. Knapp, the physician who had only briefly examined Zona. And piece by piece, doubts began to grow. Dr. Knapp admitted that his original examination had been cursory. He hadn't properly looked at Zona's neck. He'd felt pressured by Shue's overwrought grief. He had chalked her death up to vague female troubles. But now, even he wasn't so sure. With mounting pressure and rising local curiosity, Prosecutor Preston authorized the most shocking decision of all. Zona Heaster Shue's body would be exhumed. The grave, sealed just weeks earlier, would be open again, not because of medical suspicion, but because of a mother's ghost story. It was an unprecedented move, one that could turn the town against him or unravel a hidden truth. But Preston was determined. If Mary Jane's visions were even partially correct, then the exhumation would confirm it. If not, then at least the investigation would be thorough, and rumors could be laid to rest. The day of the exhumation arrived with a chill in the air. Neighbors gathered at the cemetery's edge, their breath fogging in the cold. Some prayed. Others crossed themselves. Many just watched silently, unsure of what would come next. Dr. Knapp performed the autopsy in the small, wooden schoolhouse near the cemetery. The building, repurposed for the grim task, held the re-exhumed coffin, a few lanterns, and the secrets buried inside Zona's body. As Dr. Knapp carefully removed the scar from her neck, what he found was exactly what the ghost had described. The neck was broken, the windpipe crushed. Finger-shaped bruises still marked her throat, preserved by the cold of the West Virginia winter. The exact break was between the first and second vertebrae, the very detail Zona's ghost had described to her mother. This was not an accident. This was not illness. This was murder. Mary Jane Hester's insistence, her unwavering belief in her daughter's spirit, had unearthed the truth, literally. What happened next would become one of the most talked about trials in Appalachian history, one of the most controversial witnesses of all, the ghost of Zona Heaster herself. Next, Trout Shue's dark past is uncovered, and his carefully crafted facade begins to crumble. When the truth about Zona's death came to light during her exhumation, shock rippled through Greenbrier County. It wasn't just that the young woman had been murdered. It was the method, the brutality, and, most chilling of all, that her own ghost had revealed it. But as authorities prepared to arrest Trout Shue, even more disturbing facts began to surface. It turned out that the man who had strolled into town months earlier, a stranger with a confident air and strong hands fit for a blacksmith, was far more than he appeared. He hadn't come to Greenbrier to start a new life. He'd come to hide his old one. Born Erasmus Stribling Trout Shue in Augusta County, Virginia, in 1861, his very name was a twist of old Southern eccentricity and cold Appalachian reality. Though he presented himself in Greenbrier as a hard-working tradesman, the truth was that Trout had left a long, dark trail behind him, one that investigators were now beginning to uncover. As local lawmen began digging into Trout's history, they quickly found something troubling. Zona had not been his first wife. In fact, she wasn't even his second. His first marriage had ended in divorce. His wife had left him, claiming he was violent, controlling, and prone to terrifying rages. She described him as a man who demanded complete obedience, who would explode at the smallest insult. According to her, Trout had beaten her severely, more than once, and she had only narrowly escaped with her life. At the time, no formal charges were filed. It was the late 1800s, and domestic violence was too often hidden or ignored. But her testimony would come back years later to haunt him. His second wife, however, hadn't been so lucky. She had died under mysterious circumstances. The official cause of death was listed as a fall while helping to repair the chimney, but neighbors had whispered about bruises, about isolation, and about how Trout had refused to let anyone near her body after her death. No one had pressed the issue. The town was small, and Trout had moved away soon afterward. Her death had been quietly buried, until now. As news of Zona's murder spread, reporters and locals began to unearth the pattern. 3 wives, 2 of them dead, all under his control, all silenced. And Trout? He had walked away from each marriage without consequence, until now. What made Trout so dangerous wasn't just his brutality. It was his charm, his ability to present himself as a wronged man, a grieving husband, a humble worker trying to live a simple life. People believed him, until he gave them a reason not to. In Greenbrier, he had quickly integrated into the community. He worked hard at the local blacksmith shop. He made friendly conversation. He courted Zona publicly, bringing her gifts and attending church. But behind closed doors, things were different. Zona had confided in her mother that Trout was demanding and increasingly aggressive. She was afraid. She had hinted that her marriage was not what it seemed. Now, those subtle warnings rang with terrible clarity. As prosecutors prepared to take Trout to trial, the puzzle pieces fell into place. Zona had been the third in a line of women who had suffered under his control. But she would be the last, because her voice had not stayed buried. Trout was arrested shortly after the autopsy results were made public. When confronted with the evidence of Zona's broken neck, he denied everything. He insisted she had died from natural causes and accused the authorities of being manipulated by superstition and gossip. But his calm veneer began to crack when questioned about his past. He had no reasonable explanation for the deaths of his previous wives. He deflected, blamed others, changed the subject. In court, his contradictory statements and erratic behavior would only serve to reinforce the prosecution's case. It seemed that the man who had spent a lifetime controlling women and escaping scrutiny had finally been trapped. Trout Shue's dark history wasn't just backstory. It was motive, context, and a chilling pattern of escalating violence. His charm had fooled the community. His fists had silenced at least 2 women. But this time, one of them spoke back from beyond the grave, and Greenbrier County listened. Next, the trial of the century begins, where Zona's ghost takes a stand in the most paranormal testimony American justice has ever seen. As the exhumation of Zona Heaster Shue's body and the subsequent autopsy results sent shockwaves through Greenbrier County, the stage was set for a trial unlike any the region had ever seen. The case was no longer just about a woman's mysterious death. It had become a battle between reason and the supernatural, a clash between the tangible world of evidence and the intangible world of ghosts. When Trout Shue was formally charged with the murder of his wife, the case became a sensation. People from surrounding counties gathered to watch the trial unfold, and news outlets across the state reported the strange developments. The small Appalachian town found itself in the middle of a spectacle that not only questioned the law, but also the very boundaries between the living and the dead. The trial was set to begin in Lewisburg, a modest town about 30 miles from Greenbrier. The courtroom, cramped and filled with anxious spectators, buzzed with anticipation. On one side sat Trout Shue, his face hardened with stoic expression that had nothing of the anxiety creeping behind his cold eyes. On the other side was Mary Jane Hester, a grieving mother, whose face was lined with the weight of both her loss and her unshakable faith in her daughter's voice from beyond the grave. The prosecution, led by Prosecutor John Alfred Preston, had a solid case. The physical evidence, the broken neck, the bruises, the signs of strangulation, was damning. But the most explosive piece of evidence wasn't something you could hold in your hands. It was the ghostly testimony provided by Mary Jane herself. Mary Jane had become an unlikely witness in the case. Her statements about her nightly encounters with her daughter's spirit were met with skepticism and doubt, but she was resolute. She took the stand and, with a quiet, unwavering voice, told the court exactly what Zona's ghost had said. The rage, the choking, the violent death. Zona's final words from beyond the grave were now part of the record. The defense team, however, wasn't ready to concede. They scoffed at the idea of ghostly testimony being admissible in a court of law. Attorney William B. Cochran, who represented Trout, argued that Mary Jane's claims were the result of grief-induced hallucinations. The defense painted Mary Jane as a distraught mother seeking closure, someone who was unable to accept the natural loss of her daughter. They contended that the physical evidence didn't match the fantastical narrative Mary Jane had crafted. The defense, as the local press called it, tried to discredit both the autopsy and the supernatural claims. They presented their own theory that Zona's death had indeed been caused by a fall or illness, something far less sinister than murder. They tried to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of the jurors, suggesting that the broken neck might have been caused by some innocent accident, or that Mary Jane's dreams were nothing but fantasies woven in the depths of sorrow. But as the defense continued to push their case, something strange happened. The jury, made up of men and women who had known Zona for years, began to shift. They whispered amongst themselves. They exchanged glances. Despite the defense's attempts to discredit Mary Jane's testimony, the jurors were finding it harder and harder to ignore the mounting evidence. Zona's ghost was not just a symbol of grief. She was now the key witness, and the jury felt the weight of her presence in the room. It was almost as if, in the quiet tension of the trial, they too could feel Zona's sorrow and rage. The air was thick with it. Even the most skeptical of jurors couldn't shake the eerie sensation that something beyond the physical realm was at play. In the midst of the trial, there were several witnesses who added to the growing suspicion surrounding Trout Shue. Friends of Zona described the strain in her marriage. They recalled her fears about Trout's anger and how he often dominated her every move. The community spoke of his peculiar behavior at the funeral, how he had insisted on dressing Zona's body and kept it tightly sealed in the coffin. The more people spoke out, the clearer it became that Trout Shue's public persona was a lie, an elaborate mask he wore to disguise the darkness beneath. Trout's own behavior in the courtroom did nothing to help his case. He remained cold and aloof, his posture stiff and defensive, When Mary Jane testified about her dreams and visions of Zona, Trout's face grew pale. His eyes darted nervously from side to side, and his hands clenched the wooden armrests of his chair. The more Mary Jane spoke, the more his composure crumbled. He shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing in his defense, perhaps because he knew the truth had already been revealed. Despite the supernatural nature of the case, it was clear to those in the courtroom that something very real had happened. The brutal murder of Zona Heaster Shue was no longer just a theory. It was a fact. A mother's grief had called forth a spirit that demanded justice. The court was now faced with a question that transcended logic. What do you do when a ghost is your most reliable witness? The trial was about to reach its zenith, an unprecedented moment in American legal history. Trout Shue was on the verge of facing justice. But the final twist was yet to come. Next, the verdict, the strange, haunting end to a trial that shook the very foundations of the law. The trial of Trout Shue had captivated not only Greenbrier County, but the entire region. It was an extraordinary case that seemed to push the boundaries of both law and reason, a case where the supernatural collided head-on with the practicalities of justice. The courtroom was packed, and even as the trial neared its final days, no one could predict how it would end. As the days of testimony wrapped up, it was time for the defense and prosecution to make their closing arguments. The prosecution, led by John Alfred Preston, had carefully presented their case. The physical evidence, the testimony from neighbors, and the chilling accounts of Mary Jane Hester's ghostly encounters. The autopsy was clear. Zona had been murdered. Her neck had been broken, her windpipe crushed. Trout Shue had been the last to see her alive, and his behavior surrounding her death had been nothing short of suspicious. But the star witness, the one who had led them to the truth, was Zona herself. It was her spirit that had brought the case to light. It was her presence that had haunted her mother's home and forced the authorities to reopen the investigation. Mary Jane's unwavering belief in her daughter's words had exposed the truth that Trout Shue had worked so hard to bury. The defense, led by William B. Cochran, tried to poke holes in the prosecution's case. They argued that the ghostly testimony was nothing more than a desperate mother's fantasy. They pointed to the lack of direct, physical evidence linking Trout to the murder beyond the circumstantial. There was no blood on his hands, no weapon found in his possession. They claimed that the only thing the prosecution had was Mary Jane's dreamlike visions, a foundation that could crumble under scrutiny. But the more they spoke, the more the jury seemed to lose faith in their argument. The community's gut instinct told them that something dark had occurred within the walls of Zona's home. And even the most skeptical of jurors couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled over the courtroom, that something beyond the ordinary had intervened in this case. As the trial drew to a close, the jury deliberated for hours. The room buzzed with the weight of uncertainty, as everyone waited for the moment that would decide the fate of Trout Shue. Would the ghost of Zona Heaster Shue be enough to convict him? Or would his defense's arguments prove too strong? The moment stretched on for what felt like eternity. Finally, just as the sun began to set over the courthouse, the jury returned to the courtroom. They filed into the box, their faces grave, their eyes steely. The judge, Judge L.J. Wills, called the court to order. The tension was palpable as the jurors took their seats. We, the jury, find the defendant, Erasmus Stribling Trout Shue, guilty of the murder of Zona Heaster Shue, the foreman read aloud. The room erupted into a mixture of shock and relief. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. Justice had been served, but it had come in the most unlikely of ways. The ghost of a murdered woman had guided the legal system to uncover the truth, a truth that might otherwise have remained hidden forever. For Mary Jane Heaster, the verdict was bittersweet. Her daughter's killer had been brought to justice, but the woman she loved, the girl who had once held her hand and laughed with her, would never return. Still, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that her daughter's voice had been heard, even if it had been from beyond the grave. Trout Shue's sentencing was swift. He was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his wife, Zona. His once polite demeanor had crumbled in the face of his conviction. No longer was he the charming, stoic blacksmith. He was a man exposed, stripped of his carefully crafted facade. The case would go down in history as one of the most bizarre in American legal history. It would forever be remembered as a trial where a ghost had taken a stand and delivered justice from the other side. Yet, even as Trout Shue sat behind bars, some questions remained. Was it truly Zona's spirit that had led to his conviction? Or was it simply the strength of Mary Jane's belief, the unyielding love of a mother that had driven her to uncover the truth? Some would say the supernatural had played its hand. Others would claim that the mother's persistence, coupled with the evidence, had been enough to win the case. But the answer, as with many things in life, might never be fully known. In the years that followed, the story of Zona Heaster Shue and the trial that followed became a staple of local legend. People would tell the tale of the Greenbrier Ghost around campfires, in churches, and in local taverns. It became a story of justice, faith, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. Whether people believed in the supernatural or not, the story remained an indelible part of Greenbrier's history. Some say that Zona's ghost still lingers in the mountains of West Virginia, watching over the land she loved. Whether she continues to seek justice for those wronged, or simply rests in peace, remains a mystery. But one thing is certain. Zona Heaster Shue's death was no longer an unsolved mystery. Thanks to a mother's unshakable belief in the voice of a ghost, the truth had finally come to light. The story of Zona Heaster Shue, the young woman who solved her own murder from beyond the grave, has never truly faded from the collective memory of Greenbrier County, West Virginia. In fact, it has only grown with time, transforming from a strange historical footnote into a cultural touchstone. The trial that captivated the country is now a chapter in the lore of Appalachia, a place where reality and the supernatural often seem to blend seamlessly. It was a case that defied logic. A woman's ghost, thought to be no more than a whisper on the wind, had taken a stand in a court of law. Her testimony was so vivid, so real, that even the most skeptical jurors couldn't deny it. The Greenbrier Ghost, as Zona became known, had not only captured the attention of her small town, but had also become an enduring symbol of both justice and the supernatural. As the years passed, the legacy of the Greenbrier Ghost grew in various ways. Mary Jane Heaster, Zona's mother, became a figure of both local reverence and intrigue. She was seen as a woman whose love for her daughter transcended even death, a mother who, through sheer force of will, had uncovered the truth. But she was also a figure marked by the strange, the uncanny. Her faith in the paranormal had brought her to a truth that the law alone could not have uncovered. The tale of Zona's death and her subsequent revelation has become a central part of Greenbrier County's folklore. The local ghost stories, once whispered around campfires, have expanded over time, drawing visitors from across the country who wish to walk the same streets that Zona had walked, to see the sites associated with her tragic and mysterious story. People visit the Heaster family home, where Mary Jane said she had communicated with her daughter's spirit, hoping to feel a connection to the otherworldly force that had once haunted the home. Tourists flocked to the Greenbrier County Courthouse, the site of the trial that shook the region. The courtroom, still preserved in its original form, is now a historic landmark. Though the story of the Greenbrier Ghost has taken on a life of its own, people still visit, captivated by the eerie aura of the place where justice was served in the most peculiar of circumstances. Local legends have grown around the courthouse, with some claiming that the ghost of Zona still lingers in the area. Locals tell strange happenings, odd noises, and unexplained lights in the courthouse at night. There are stories of cold spots, the distinct feeling of being watched, and even flickering lights that seem to react to one's presence. Whether these events are a result of imagination or something more supernatural remains uncertain. But the stories persist. The Greenbrier Ghost legacy has also seeped into popular culture. Zona's story has been retold in books, documentaries, and even podcasts. Authors and filmmakers have been fascinated by the eerie combination of love, death, and justice in the story. The case has been portrayed as a symbol of how the supernatural can reach into the most mundane and earthly realms, reminding us that there is still much we do not understand about the universe. Zona's tale has been featured in true crime anthologies, and her ghostly testimony has become a staple of discussions surrounding the supernatural, murder mysteries, and the legal system. In the modern age, Zona's ghost is often invoked as a metaphor for justice denied and justice served. Her story has become a powerful reminder that sometimes the truth is so overwhelming, so undeniable, that it cannot be buried, even by death. The eerie circumstances surrounding her murder and subsequent revelation have made her a symbol of the idea that justice will always find a way, no matter the obstacles. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Greenbrier Ghost is the cultural shift it sparked in the way people view the intersection of the supernatural and real-life events. Before Zona's case, ghosts were typically seen as figures from folklore, tales passed down through generations to explain the unexplainable. After Zona's case, ghosts began to be seen in a different light, as potential sources of truth, as forces that could influence the material world. The Greenbrier Ghost challenged conventional thinking about the boundaries between life and death, between the living and the dead. Even today, many in Greenbrier County still tell the story of Zona Heaster Shue, passing it down to the generations. Some may view it as a mere ghost story, a chilling tale meant to entertain. But for others, it's a reminder of the power of a mother's love, the courage to seek justice against all odds, and the possibility that, in rare and extraordinary circumstances, even the dead may have something to say. So, the story of the Greenbrier Ghost remains alive, woven into the fabric of local history and culture. It's a tale that continues to captivate the imaginations of those who hear it. A story that proves that sometimes the most powerful force in the world is the love between a mother and her child. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, Zona's story endures, a testament to the mysteries that exist beyond the reach of the living. In Greenbrier County, the ghost of Zona Heaster Shue lives on, not just as a tragic figure, but as a symbol of truth, justice, and the extraordinary lengths to which a mother will go to ensure that her child's voice is heard, even from beyond the grave. The case of the Greenbrier Ghost, where a spirit was credited with solving her own murder, didn't just become a local legend. It ignited a broader conversation about the supernatural's role in the real world. Zona Heaster Shue's ghostly testimony was seen as one of the first instances in which a spirit was considered a legitimate source of evidence in a murder case. This unprecedented event forever altered the way people viewed the connection between the living and the dead, especially within the context of paranormal investigations. In the years following the trial, the influence of the Greenbrier Ghost story began to ripple through the emerging field of paranormal research. While many in the scientific community were still deeply skeptical of anything resembling ghosts, the Greenbrier case captured the attention of both enthusiasts and professionals alike. For some, the story was a source of inspiration, offering a fascinating real-world example of how ghosts could be integral to solving real-life mysteries. The birth of modern paranormal investigation. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the rise of formal paranormal investigations, often led by spiritualists and researchers who sought to understand life after death. But it wasn't until the Greenbrier Ghost case that the concept of ghosts as active participants in criminal investigations became a topic of serious discussion. It challenged traditional views and forced a rethinking of what ghosts could do and how they might assist in uncovering hidden truths. In the wake of the Greenbrier Ghost involvement in the Shue case, paranormal investigators began to explore the possibility of ghosts acting as more than just lost souls wandering the earth. The ghost as a witness, a spirit that could provide testimony or help uncover facts, became a new area of interest for many within the field. Researchers began to ask themselves, what if spirits could be called upon to solve crimes? By the mid-20th century, ghost hunting teams started to form in earnest, equipped with the latest in paranormal technology. While many of these groups focus on capturing evidence of hauntings, such as EVP, electronic voice phenomena, recordings, or photograph apparitions, others began investigating with a more focused intent. Could a ghost reveal the circumstances of their own death? Could they provide details of unsolved murders, accidents, or disappearances? The Greenbrier Ghost story had an undeniable influence on this movement. Some modern-day paranormal investigators even cite Zona's case as one of the key moments that shaped paranormal law. The idea that ghosts have rights and could, in some instances, be considered witnesses in a court of law. This notion would go on to inspire both fiction and nonfiction account of hauntings that involve supernatural entities, providing valuable insights into unsolved crimes. Paranormal tools and techniques inspired by the Greenbrier Ghost. In the years following the trial, the methods used to investigate hauntings became more sophisticated. Ghost hunting technology saw rapid advancements in the 20th century, including the creation of devices such as the Spirit Box, a device used to capture real-time audio responses from spirits, motion sensors, infrared cameras, and EMF, electromagnetic field detectors. These tools were often used to collect evidence during investigations, particularly when investigating claims of spirits interacting with the physical world. Mary Jane Hester's persistent belief in her daughter's ghost as a source of information prompted many in the paranormal community to adopt similar approaches. Psychic mediums, once considered fringe figures, were now being invited to conduct investigations, with some claiming to communicate directly with spirits who had unfinished business, much like the Greenbrier Ghost. While the scientific community remained skeptical of the idea that ghosts could actively intervene in criminal investigations, there was an increasing interest in whether paranormal phenomena could indeed shed light on events that traditional methods could not explain. Over time, the notion of ghosts providing testimony or helping solve mysteries became a cornerstone of paranormal literature, with several high-profile investigations citing the Greenbrier Ghost's influence on their work. The Greenbrier Ghost in popular culture, a catalyst for paranormal storytelling. The Greenbrier Ghost's role as a pivotal figure in the supernatural investigation world didn't stop at real-life cases. Her story has been explored in a wide range of books, films, and television shows that deal with ghosts, mysteries, and the afterlife. Over time, the idea of ghosts as active participants in investigations has become a staple of paranormal fiction, a genre that thrives on blending the supernatural with real-world concerns. Shows like Ghost Whisperer, Medium, and The Haunting of Hill House all share a common thread with the Greenbrier Ghost narrative. Characters who communicate with spirits to uncover hidden truths, often solving crimes or unraveling mysteries from the past. The Greenbrier Ghost set the stage for countless other ghost-related mysteries, becoming a touchstone for how to weave the supernatural into investigations. In fact, some true crime documentaries and podcasts, particularly those dealing with unsolved crimes and cold cases, have drawn direct inspiration from Zona's story. Investigative journalists and documentary filmmakers sometimes bring up the Greenbrier Ghost when discussing cases where no one has been convicted, suggesting the possibility that ghosts, like Zona, could one day provide the missing piece of evidence needed to bring closure to unresolved cases. A broader impact: spiritualism and paranormal laws. Beyond the realm of paranormal investigations, the Greenbrier Ghost case also played a role in shaping the development of spiritualism. The belief that the dead can communicate with the living. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, spiritualism was a popular movement, with mediums and psychics holding seances to contact the deceased. The Greenbrier case was a modern example of how spiritualism could intersect with the judicial process. For many, it offered a new perspective on justice, one that wasn't confined to the material world. Legal scholars began to discuss the possibility of spiritual testimony in courtrooms, opening the door to new conversations about the intersection of law and the supernatural. Although spiritual testimony has not yet been recognized as valid in any court of law, the Greenbrier Ghost case provided a basis for further exploration. The story of Zona Heaster Shue, the Greenbrier Ghost, continues to captivate, bewilder, and inspire long after her death. Her tragic tale has woven itself into the fabric of American folklore, representing not only an extraordinary moment in the history of law and justice, but also a testament to the power of a mother's love and the mysteries of the supernatural. Though the facts of the case have been documented and the trial concluded, the story is far from settled in the minds of those who continue to debate the role of the supernatural in solving crimes. Many, even today, wrestle with the question: did Zona's ghost really testify in a court of law? Was the truth that was revealed through her spirit a supernatural intervention, or merely the product of an incredibly devoted mother's imagination and belief? Perhaps the most enduring mystery of all is whether the Greenbrier Ghost truly existed as a sentient being after death, capable of reaching out from beyond the grave to aid in the pursuit of justice. For some, the fact that Zona's ghost led the authorities to the truth is a deeply unsettling idea, an unsettling glimpse into what might lie beyond the veil of death. For others, it's a story of remarkable courage and love that transcended even the most terrifying boundary known to humankind. The impact of Zona's case on paranormal investigations and spiritualism cannot be understated. While skepticism still surrounds the concept of ghosts as active participants in legal proceedings, Zona's case inspired an entire generation of paranormal researchers to examine potential for spirits to communicate vital information from the afterlife. Though no other legal cases have yet to have a ghost as a primary witness, the Greenbrier Ghost legacy continues to influence the way the supernatural is regarded in the realms of both law and investigative science. The case also left a lasting mark on the local community in Greenbrier County. Today, the Greenbrier Ghost remains a source of pride and fascination for many. The legend is still discussed around dinner tables, at local festivals, and in whispered conversations among those who live near the once tragic, now iconic Heaster home. People continue to visit the courthouse, retracing the steps of the trial that resulted in one of the most astonishing convictions in legal history. They walk through the winding paths of the Appalachian foothills, where the echo of Zona's spirit is said to linger. For those living outside of Greenbrier County, the Greenbrier Ghost is often seen as a symbol of the supernatural's ability to intervene in the physical world. It represents the unseen forces that may be at work even when we can't perceive them, and the belief that justice, no matter how elusive, will eventually be served, whether through earthly measures or the unseen hand of the dead. The case also continues to influence paranormal media. From books to documentaries, from podcasts to movies, the Greenbrier Ghost story has been adapted and retold countless times. It remains a central theme for those who explore the unresolved mysteries of the afterlife, offering a story that blends true crime with the unexplained. The haunting appeal of the Greenbrier Ghost is simple. It speaks to our primal fears and desires, the desire for justice, for truth, and for answers to life's most profound questions. Zona Heaster Shue's story serves as a haunting reminder of the power of love and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Even in the face of death, her mother's relentless search for the truth, against all odds, led to an extraordinary outcome, a moment in time when the living and the dead met on equal ground. It is a story that blurs the line between the natural and the supernatural, leaving an indelible mark on the hearts of those who hear it. In the end, we are left with a paradox that has no easy resolution. Was the Greenbrier Ghost a real phenomenon, or was it simply a tragic series of coincidences, compounded by grief and a mother's love? No one can say for sure. But one thing is certain. The story of Zona Heaster Shue will continue to haunt us, to compel us to ask questions about justice, the afterlife, and the mysteries that lay beyond our understanding. The case of the Greenbrier Ghost has been etched into the annals of history, not just as a strange courtroom drama, but as a compelling tale of how love and loss can transcend the boundary between life and death. It reminds us that the search for the truth is not bound by time, space, or even the grave. And as long as stories are told, and as long as there are people willing to listen, the Greenbrier Ghost will continue to stand as a testament to the mysterious, uncharted territory that lies beyond the world we know. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're fascinated by true crime and paranormal mysteries. Hit the bell icon so you won't miss any of our chilling stories. What do you think? Could a ghost really solve a murder? Let us know in the comments below.